did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the House of Asher. I am your host, Steve Asher, and I hope you guys are having a super wonderful weekend. It's lovely weather out. I could use it a little colder, but I'm kind of a big guy, so I like winter and fall. But I hope you guys are out there having a great time and doing some stuff with your family and just having a heck of a time. Maybe out there playing with your four-legged kids or whatever you guys happen to have. Hopefully you're having a great start of your weekend. Okay, well, as you guys know, growing up, I loved everything from scary movies to adventure movies to space movies to sci-fi movies to adventure movies, all kinds of different stuff. And one of the big things that got me into reading, because I was dyslexic, was, books that maybe they were comic books, or maybe they were not necessarily like first reader books or anything, but just more interesting tales. It didn't have to do with the paranormal. Maybe it's talking about pirates. Maybe it's talking about an adventure, like a native boy or something in the woods or whatever. All that stuff drew me, and I really love that stuff. And I've never kind of lost my love for that type of literature. And I think it's really important because not everybody. I mean, everybody wants to act like whatever, they come out super cool, listen to this band, and yes, of course I like, Yeats and Wordsworth and all these different type of people, but everybody had something that started them, again, I loved a lot of adventure books and kind of like, scary stories to read at night and all that kind of stuff. And we have on this week as a guest a lady who does just that. She writes her own fantasy books about all kinds of different things, and we're going to get into that right now. Her name is Lauri Williams. Lauri, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, it's one of those things that everybody's different. Everyone kind of approaches these things differently. Now, I know about the Cave of Mystery, okay, and that was I think it was out March 19th, 2019, right?
Yes.
Okay, and which is what is good is that you have it in Kindle, but you also have it in paperback. Do you find that people, and is it something that's different generationally? Do you find certain people just really like the Kindle? They like the accessibility, walking around, and do you find some people's like, no, I want the book? I'm sort of well, go ahead, and I'll make a comment.
I find it half-half. There are a lot of people who still like holding an actual book. I am that person.
Yeah. Well, see, that's me. We have a museum here called Adsmore, and it's a real old kind of antebellum place. I mean, it's sort of like Princeton's big draw. Giving us some free advertisement there. But they had some first printings of Edgar Allan Poe's work, and I looked at that and I was like, these are originals? I said yes, and I said, can I ask you something? Because like I said, I knew the people pretty well, and I was there doing some other stuff for them, and they said, would you like to look at them? I said, yeah, actually I'd like to smell them. And they laughed, and I said, I know it sounds weird, but I love books. It's had a history to it, and it had a little touch of age to it, but I could also smell maybe like cigar brandy type, like a guy sitting there reading a book, with his decanter and taking a little puff of his cigar, and he couldn't put the book down. He loved it so much he was, enthralled in that. But I know my kids are like more about Kindle and more about like you said, jump and go. I'm not, like you said, I'm definitely a bookphile. So, how did you come to this? What brought this about?
Well, I was listening to my kids as they were going through their grade school, junior high, and naturally they have to read so many books in a week. and then they get stickers. Well, I would listen to them, and I got to thinking, well, I could write something similar. And one page went to 2 pages to 20, and then by the time I was done, I had a full book.
Well, let me ask you now. I've written a few myself, but it mainly touches on like local folklore and ghost tales, and that old bridge down on Highway 12. Well, there's an old legend about a witch or something. But I was not a writer by vocation. Did you just kind of fall into this, or was this something that you were kind of primed for from your previous work and things like that?
No, I just got into it. Like I said, I was just listening to the kids and thought to myself, I could write a little story, even if it, didn't amount to anything, just a little story that my kids could read and enjoy, because the characters are actually, their personalities are actually my kids.
Yeah. See, that's interesting. I don't think people realize. I think it depends on the artist, and and I'm not trying to use it in a term in a snobby way. You produce something like that, you paint something like that, you sculpt something like that, you draw, whatever. There's elements of either yourself or somebody you know. I remember seeing a T-shirt that said something like, "Be warned, if your friends or your family or somebody I bumped into on the bus, you may end up in my book."
Yeah.
And that's 100% true, and because I've told certain family members, like, and they just said, "No, please don't put me in your book." And I was like, "I can change your name." I can, like, no, and some I'm really trying to work on to get them in there. How were they about it when did you let them know ahead of time to go, "Wait a minute, this kid sounds a lot like me, Mom"?
Actually, I did tell them, and they were really happy that I was using them as characters in the book. It was my 2 kids, and then really good friends of ours, their 3 boys. And the story, it's a fiction, naturally, and their personalities is what I used. And a couple of the names are the names of the kids, but the other ones are names that I just pulled out of my hat.
Right. Well, look, I know Hickory Creek is the name of the community, right? Or more or less, right?
Hickory Creek is a small logging town, and I just made up the name.
Right.
I
Well, I
didn't.
mean, that could be, and that's the sort of thing when you get it, like you have it sort of one of those deals like Willow Creek or Timber Hollow, or just one of those sort of, you get into flavor right off the jump. You're going, okay, this is sort of like kind of a Midwestern, maybe slightly southern town. Everybody knows everybody. Most of the stores
Correct.
have been the same places for 150 years, owned by their grandparents and so on. And it's a good primer, for those people that can relate to that and go, yeah, I know exactly, like I could envision this place. And,
Right.
and which I think helps. It helps to a point put readers at ease, to where, like, if it would be hard for me to read a book about, I don't know, like a real super bustling, busy town, because I've been to them and dealing with my work and my writing and stuff, but I'm a country boy, I'd rather be at home on my back deck with my grandkids and, dealing with my flowers and things and whatever we got out back, as opposed to going to a nightclub and taking the subway. It's just, I'm not,
Correct.
I'm sure it
Correct.
sounds like you're the same way. So when this first came out, now is this your maiden voyage into the literary world, or do you have some other books or some other things out there?
No, this is the first one. I actually had, this one was published under a different name, and I rewrote the story, and it's published under this name. So it's the same story, but better.
Right, you kind of you put a high gloss on it and polished it up, and that's the thing. If you go, I always say keep your original manuscripts raw and just warts and all. So if you, every writer, I think every writer, any artist, I think there's times they're going, oh, man, I'm trying, but I'll never be. Say if you're a violinist, I'll never be as good as this guy, or if you're a tuba player or whatever, and everybody's like, well, go back and look what you originally wrote. And odds are comparatively, it may not look like kindergarten drawings or first reader books, but you're going to go, I've come a decent way, and each book is a learning process.
Correct.
Now, are you planning on doing more in regards of like making this into a series, or are you going to do sort of have like a loose affiliation of towns where they kind of interconnect, so you can build on maybe characters from other books again in upcoming novels?
Well, actually, I have the second one finished. I am going through the editing stage, and it's the same characters. It's just where the first one stopped, the second one picks it up, and it brings the families full circle, is how I could describe it. You find out how it began.
Okay. Well, what I wonder too is like you said, you guys are, if I can say, around Tennessee.
Yes.
Did like when you started going, because I'm assuming you've started doing book signings and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of getting out there thing. How were people with it? Were they were they pretty accepting of it? Because not everybody. It's sort of funny. Like if you write a book about whatever Stonewall Jackson or JFK or Martin Luther King or somebody, and it's a historical book. Well, they're going to go, oh, that's great, that's wonderful. But sometimes it just depends on the people. If you go, oh, well, it's a work of fiction, and then they kind of go, oh, I never quite understood that. But it seems like the ones who are really into that go, really, and it draws them. I think you have to play the right crowds. How was it when you kind of started getting out and doing that? Did people seem to accept it pretty openly, or what?
It's a hard, as you know, being an author, it takes a little time for people to really see it, instead of just glancing, to get them interested in the story.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people buy the book that is my age, your age. You have grandchildren, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I've had them read the story, and it takes them back to their childhood.
Right.
And that's what I want. It's for any age of people, kids. I've had kids email me, write me letters saying how they really love the story. And I've had people call me, adults call and tell me, just like I said, how it takes them back to their childhood, and it just makes them feel good.
Yeah, I do think there's something to be said. Like, some people talk about nostalgia like it's a bad thing. I think you can you can dwell completely in a past situation and trying to relive certain things, and that's not always healthy. But I think it's a good look back, and especially for people who weren't of our generation. Like I said, I'm fixing to turn 50 in November, which you heard my Kentuckian coming out. I'm fixing to become 50, but it's one of those things. I know anytime I would write stuff, generally I always tacked in some of the history because there's always like if you tie in a little history and it's believable and it sort of crosses over in like a believable zone. I mean, you can go extremely far out in fiction, and that's cool and all, but I mean, you may not want to hear about killer robots and laser beam eyes and freaking saucer pincher claw alien robots and stuff. But when you put something that's relatable, it's a relatable face to it. It seems like there's a I don't know. There's a purity and a wholesomeness to it, which I think people relate to that because there's so much crazy stuff going on in the world. I mean, I guess it always has been, but turn on the news, all you see is something mad, something crazy, people hating each other from either
Yes.
side of the whatever. And sometimes it's nice to go, hey, do you remember we used to take mason jars and catch I don't know if you call them fireflies or lightning bugs. We call them lightning bugs here, and all that kind of stuff, and make little forts out in the woods and lean-tos and all that
Correct.
kind of stuff. You know how it is. Go catch uh, minnows or crawdads or what do you want to call them in the creek and go fishing with a cane pole. I mean, it sounds like 1812, but I mean, especially if you're in the South or the Midwest, that's how most kids were raised, at least up until the late middle
Well,
70s.
Steve, that is exactly correct. And with this story, uh, I took it back to when I was, young, on how we could run all over town and our parents weren't really that concerned because everyone knew everyone. And uh, we would stay out, and at supper time, you knew when to get home. You rode your bike. You
Right.
didn't uh, stay inside playing video games.
Yeah. Well, you knew, like, what was the thing? Back in the day, we didn't have to call people. We drive by and go, hey, it's Tommy and Mary's bike. I guess they're over at Jim's. Oh, hey, Mom, can I go
Yep.
hang out with them for a while? And there's that funny thing of, I remember everything was cool until that street light come on, and I better be home. And they'll
Yes.
start popping down. They'll start ding, ding, and they'll start popping down the street. And it's like, before where I'm at, I better be the house. And
Yes.
it was very different. I mean, do you remember, like, we used to do a lot of ramping with, like on culverts, like just over the edge of somebody's road, like the
Yes.
little, and whatever, and we would jump our little BMXs or do whatever. And
Oh, yeah.
it felt like, you jump, what, foot and a half, 2 foot. You felt like Evel Knievel or Fonzie going over like a Shark Tank. And and I think imagination, it's not that so much that kids don't have imaginations, is I think they've got so much at them, coming at them all the time. They have sensory overload, and there's so much noise, it's hard for them sometimes to turn it off, stand outside, and
Right.
just listen to the cicadas and the wind, wind
Oh,
chimes. I have wind
oh,
chimes. I
yeah.
love them. And I think, like you said, people kind of from our generation, or someone who was raised like that, say you were raised on a farm or something, you were used to getting up early and hearing the songbirds and all that. You connect with that, and it
Oh,
doesn't even
yes.
necessarily have to be somebody who's from the country. It could be somebody from the city. Um, who has would you say who's like your biggest supporters? Is there a certain demographic, certain age, certain sex, things like that?
You know, that's a hard one because I've had everyone from 9 years old on up love it. Uh, I would have to say 9 to 12 have bought it, and they get to, they start it and then they don't stop until the end. I've had several parents tell me they sat down and they didn't put it down until they got to the end. That's
That's
how
that's good.
it captured their interest.
Yeah, and that's like that's like one of those sort of attaboys, like if someone coming up to you going, so you're doing another one, right? When's it going to be out? Like you're finishing editing. It's like, well, it's going to be like the first of next year. Next year, oh, I'm like, I can only put out so many books, you know. And that's a nice feeling. It's nice to be wanted, you know,
Yes.
someone to recognize your art
Yes.
like that. Um, Now I know that, like, are you through? Did you like self-publish? Because I like my last two of, or next last three I've self-published. I had two through a publishing house before, and it wasn't bad. They did like all the artwork and this and that, but it costs you too. You know, so instead of getting like half the pie or whatever, you got like maybe a third of the pie. Um, like with self-publishing, you pretty much get, you know, you don't really have to invest a whole lot. You may pay somebody to do a cover, or if you got a friend who's a graphic artist, even better. Um,
Right.
you know, I just didn't know if you was a self-publisher, or if you were through a company or whichever.
I went through Page Publishing,
Hmm.
and it's a self-publish, and they've been very good. I did a radio interview um, on the 1st of October, and it's been in a lot of newspapers and online. They've done a lot of campaign for me, and I've been really happy with them.
That's good. You know, because I mean, it depends on where you're at. It's real easy for like a new publisher sometimes, or a new publisher, sorry, a new writer to kind of get suckered into a bad deal. You know, there's not always honest publishing houses. Let's be real.
Correct.
Which it
Correct.
sounds really good that you have found one that seems to work with you. Now, when I started doing this, and I'm sorry to make it about me, but I'm just trying to make it where you can relate to what I'm saying. When I first come into this, again, I was not a writer by vocation. I had at that time basically did, well, I mean, I did my schooling, and then I went and did criminal justice as part of my college work. But
Okay.
as of I was not taking advanced, you know, lit classes and blah blah blah, and you know how to be a writer workshops or anything like that. This was not on my horizon in any way. But what helped me a whole lot, especially when I went and started doing some self pubs, um, was there was a local group of writers, and it was sort of like, oh, I had a friend of mine, and he was like, it's like, oh, here's one of the unwashed. He's new. Let's kind of teach him how to do this, you know, so he doesn't get clinked on. It was kind of like get under my wing, and I'll protect you, little birdie, you know. And they were really good
Hmm.
people. Do you kind of have like a little circle of like friends that are fellow writers that work together? It seems like every little community, more often than not, people get along. You know, there's not that sort of extreme competitive cutthroat stuff as it is like in the great big leagues. So, do you have something similar like that?
Well, when we lived in Virginia, I did go to a writers club, and we've since moved to Tennessee, and I have not contacted a writers group. We live out in the country, and it's a good 20, 25 miles to the nearest big town. And I've just not connected with them yet.
Hmm.
I've, I have, I think it's called um, Writers Club, where you go on and you put in the town, and it'll bring up different writers where they meet, what time, what day, and they usually, the ones in Virginia, you take 10 papers or 10 pages, you go there, you talk about it, and they give you, say, 15 minutes. They will critique your work that you've done, and then if you agree with their their critique, you go home and you rewrite it. But I did find that writers group very interesting and helpful. Like I said, we've been here a year and a half. I just haven't connected with one yet.
Right. Well, it seems. What was the old adage of too many cooks spoil the stew and whatnot? Um,
And
it
that's true.
well, it's one of these things. I definitely bounce off ideas from people and kind of go, "What do you think?" My first thing I think of is, "What do I enjoy?" And because I can't write stuff I'm not feeling, it comes off fake, washy, wishy-washy. It's not. It just doesn't have me in it because I don't feel it. Um, so what I've done pretty much just like, look, here's some subjects I want to do. What do you guys think? And they'll go, well, okay, this may be pretty cool. Like, I don't know if you watch much television, but like, you remember like Walking Dead and the whole lot of those zombie movies are out. So there's a billion people writing books about zombies, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I know this probably is hot, but I don't want to write about this. I want to write about different things, but touches on that, like you said, that small town ethos. That when you could, not have to lock your doors every night. Um,
Correct.
where neighbors, would like hang out in the backyards and have maybe like a little fire pit going, and all the kids are roasting marshmallows, and the parents are talking about whatever,
The good old days.
good old days. I remember. I've brought this up before. Back in the like 70s. I don't remember the 60s. I was just born, but definitely in the 70s. Everyone had like those, what they used to call them, like TNT 8 tracks, and they would be listening to like whatever, Elton John, Fleetwood Mac, who's the guy that did Hot Legs, Rod Stewart, all that stuff, and of course there'd be the disco, all that disco stuff, Solid Gold, and all that stuff, and that was what was playing in the radios in there, and you could go to different neighborhoods. And it's like, okay, if you'd hear more Spanish music and maybe Spanish sections and whatever, maybe more R&B and funk and stuff, and more urban areas. And that was extremely cool because the music of the time for me was very important because it played a large part in making it the soundtrack of that experience. Um, is there something like that you want to do that maybe you haven't yet? Do you have a concept maybe like you would want to try to get some of your stories either onto the small screen, onto the big screen, or you just kind of
I
content with?
would actually, I would love for this to go on uh, the big screen. I really feel that it would be it would be a hit uh, because it is it a family. It teaches family. It teaches how to keep your word. Uh,
So it
just
seems like it
it's
has
just
a
a
strong moral
wholesome. It,
lesson in it.
yes, very much, and it has. I don't want to give it away,
Right. Well, yeah, yeah. Don't do that. But
but the kids once once they get into the cave, anything's possible. It's one of those things that the imagination just goes wild. And I believe that if it could be a movie with the second one together with it, it would be a hit. I strongly feel that it would be a hit.
well, let me ask you. I know you've kind of picked, uh, and for me, it's sort of like that. How do I word this? Almost that twilight in the imaginative part of young people, that 12, 13 years old, just before they start worrying about boys and girls, just before they're getting bogged down with well, I've really got to get my grades up because, my dad wants me to go to a good school, or he wants me to take over the business, or mom wants me to do whatever. Um, when you can still kind of run and play and do some stuff and kind of lose yourself in play, which
Right.
if you talk, guys like Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, and stuff, talked about that. It says imagination and the human animal is, and it's not just there by happenstance. This all helps develop, the brain and their ability to problem solve and critical thinking and all that, without doing anything, adding anything. It's purely natural.
Yes.
So, is there a reason that you necessarily picked these kids at this age to have this experience?
It was, like I said earlier, my kids. I wanted it their age group. I wanted to keep it where the kids didn't have a lot of responsibility. Of course, they had chores to do in the book that they had, because the families were low income because of the time of the story, late 50s or early 50s to mid 50s. They lived on farms, so they had chores to do, responsibilities with school, and then play. Just like with you and I, when we were in school, we had chores to do, then homework, then play.
Right. Well, and there's that thing too, especially when you put them in that sort of the economic situation, and I think that's more people than not, especially in Midwestern areas and small towns. Even if you don't necessarily have a functioning farm, parents are scratching out a living. You've got this and that going on at home, and all the other, the trappings of suburban existence or a rural existence. Like you said, there's that element that things have to be met. Certain, T's crossed and I's dotted.
Right.
Which again shows you that kind of character building aspect of it, and I think that's really cool, because it's so much
Yes.
in stuff anymore. It's either maybe they'll have like a very interesting sci-fi element, but it's like, okay, well, who are the people? It's great that they've got great tech, or that they have an interesting place to encounter. What are they bringing to it? What are they leaving with? Has it changed them?
Mhm.
Did it challenge it, or whatever? And it's cool to see that you're doing it the way you're doing it. I think it's pretty cool.
Well, I want to go back to how I said the low income. I did that because in the area of town in my mind, it was small town and very hard for work. And I would have to say maybe like Little House on the Prairie type, small farm life where people did bartering. You have uh, corn. In this town that I had in my mind, you go to someone, say, I'll exchange these 12 eggs if you'll give me some flour, type of town.
Right.
And to me, we've lost that. We've lost that in a lot of areas where people will trade things without money, and
Yeah.
that's just the way life is,
Mm-hmm.
progress.
Right. Well, everything now has a middleman. It's like you said. I remember back in the day, and I had some friends that would make their own like sorghum molasses or maple syrup and stuff, and we had some friends that had dairy farms and stuff, and you could never exactly, I mean, you couldn't really sell raw milk and stuff, but it'd be like, hey, we'll help you with this and that if we can get like a couple things of raw milk. And it was just like you said, it was that kind of barter trade deal, and it was. I don't know if you've ever heard. Did you ever hear the story of? This just come up. It makes me think of my mom. My mom's people were Appalachian French Huguenots that come over, good Lord, a long, long time ago and settled and slowly moved in. So everything's an oral story to me. And she had talked to me about the story of the man in stone suit, where this old man come up in this town. They were kind of busy and a little snooty, and he put a big rock in it, stirred up some water, and everybody's walking by and curious. And he's like a little wooden spoon. He's like, that's not too bad. It's going to turn out pretty good. And so they get curious and, well, what's going on? Well, I'm making some soup. Oh, it's going to be really good soup. And then I said, boy, I wish it'd be really just perfect if I could maybe find a potato or a carrot or.
Yeah.
Because at first he went around asking somebody, so we don't have any extra food. And then slowly every member of the community put it in, and they all had a great meal. And then he kind of gave them a moral lesson. It's that twist that I was noticing in what you're talking about with your book, is that you may not even get it in a way that it's a moral lesson, but it kind of blindsides you, but a positive way. There needs to be more of that, for sure. And
yeah, we do need more of that, and that is actually where I was going with this book, is what you just described about the soup.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really feel that if a lot of people read it, they would also agree that's how you and I grew up in that era, and it was just so peaceful and fun to do.
Well,
back then we didn't think it was fun, but when you're an adult and you're
right.
looking back,
I don't know. I mean, there was something to be said for neighbors who actually knew each other. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even now, you're going to have neighbors who want to know all your information, but it's different. Like the era of going to your neighbor and say, I'm sorry, can I, borrow you a cup of sugar or something, is almost non-existent.
Yes, it is.
We had an older lady named Margaret who lived next door to us for forever. My wife and both mine and her parents died when we were in our 20s, so our children did not know their grandparents very much at all, and then she was sort of a surrogate grandmother. And whenever she was here, like she was a country gal, and sometimes we'd grill out burgers and bring that over, and I was like, well, hey, we have some extra pieces of squash. I said, oh, well, thank you, that's great, and bring over some what do you call it, zucchini, and then she turned around and make some little zucchini bread and give it to the kids, and that was that. There was nothing was expected, and there was no obligation. It was just being good to people, and
Yes.
it seems I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound like that old guy and go, well, the world's not the same anymore. But I think it's there, but it's harder to be that way because all you hear about is kids getting kidnapped and whatnot. And I think
Yes, it's dwindling away,
Yeah.
actually.
well,
Even if someone's sick, taking them a pot roast for dinner. If someone gets hurt and neighbors bring over meals for, several days to help out, that's
Sure.
dwindling away.
Well, part of it is, and I'm not meaning to get away from your book, we're just kind of touching on the social implications and whatnot. It seems like people on a certain level, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are communities that are trying to make like community gardens and everybody works a little bit on it and blah, blah, blah. But more often than not, people don't even talk to each other in the same house. They'll text you, or they'll, I'm like, aren't you in the other room? Well, yeah, I'm like, are you okay? The old days of that, because I explained to the kids, it's like, look, we had pay phones We had
Right.
payphones. We knew what time.
Right.
I didn't even wear a watch because I knew how to more or less tell you what time it was, where the sun was against the horizon. Like all these skills are lost. You
Yes.
know, it would be like trying to, me to try to make a tannery of making leather. I wouldn't have a clue. That's something my great grandparents did. So I guess we're as guilty of it as anybody. But I don't know if every generation, which like I don't know if you're a music person, rock, country, opera, whatever, but like when Elvis come in, it's like, oh my God, and everyone's going to go nuts, and these kids are going to go crazy, and the hips and burn every record. But compared to like say how it is now, I grew up on a lot of rock and metal back in the '80s, and I remember people did not like that. Um, but it does seem like there's a certain, I don't want to say a soul change. I don't want to get that deep with it, but I I think more or less it's become almost stigmatized. Like I say, if you were in the neighborhood now and you moved in, and then the guys like, hey, how's everybody doing? Talking to that, maybe talking to the neighbor or the wife, or, well, hey, how you doing? We're new in the neighborhood, and talking to the kids. They may go, why are you talking to my kids? Like, we just moved in. They rode up on their bicycles. I mean, I've seen like when little kids, because like our little boy has CP, and if a kid is in a grocery store and the kid's staring, the mama like turning their head around. I was like, no, that's okay. And he said, well, he shouldn't stare. I said, why wouldn't he? He's never seen a kid in a wheelchair probably. And I said, yeah. I said, that's just who he is. The days of, hey, how are you, neighbor, is gone. I know when I was in Chicago visiting some of my wife's family, I was coming up a sidewalk from a grocery store, and I just went, I mean, I was very just right out of the woods. I was like, howdy. And they jumped back, and I was like, have a good day. And they just watched you walk down the street like, what planet is this guy from? Um, but,
I do that a lot.
you know, are it, like with you being from Virginia, how much of a culture shock was it from coming from there down into Tennessee, or, Tennessee area?
Oh, it was a shock. We're actually from Illinois.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have family up in Southern Illinois, and then we also have some family up around Elmhurst.
Yes, I come from Canton, Illinois,
Okay.
which is
Know
30
exactly where that's
miles
at.
away from 30 miles away from Peoria.
Right. Um, yeah, that's got to be different. That's got to be different.
Yes, it is. The community we moved from in Virginia, our neighbors, we had a very tight group of neighbors. We would sit outside and talk in the evening or in the morning. If you didn't have to go off to work, you'd sit outside and shoot the breeze for a little bit, and then you went along your day, and then at night you gather again.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I'm sure it was a very organic thing too. I mean, it wasn't. I doubt you guys had to plan a lot, and well, let me check my day planner, and it just sort of happened. Like I said, just
exactly,
on a very pure level.
and yes, and down here in Tennessee, we actually live in the country, and I'm starting to meet neighbors, but your neighbors are a little far apart.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
the
it
thing.
it has been a little shock.
Well, that's the thing. If you were from anywhere with a tighter kind of demographic, where there's more houses per capita and whatnot, because like here I think we're like an hour 15 from Nashville. We're about 3.5 hours from St. Louis. We're probably a good 6 from Chicago. So
Okay.
everything is a couple-hour drive. I mean, we have Walmart and whatnot, and like a lot of towns and stuff. But like you said, when you're out in it, out in the country, it's like if you're running the store, you may odds are you're not going to run every single day to Walmart or to whatever Whole Foods or wherever you go get your food. Um, it's like you said, it's like pioneer days. Well, we're going to go do our monthly run down to the store. We're going to get our sorghum and our
Correct.
flour and our whatnot. People who don't live in a rural area don't get it any more than I would maybe get set having to leave 2.5 hours every morning to sit in rush hour traffic to get to my job. I'd want to kill myself. I couldn't do it. And bless those that can do it. I just can't. Oh, I was going to ask you because I had family who moved in or had moved from like the Chicago area here, and they were like cats, just squirrely. They took them forever to get to it because they couldn't sleep because there was no sirens. I said, "Why don't you get a scanner or leave cops on or something playing on your television in the living room, just low, just enough you can hear cars and whistles." And it took them forever. Like the woods and the cicadas and the tree frogs. I got a call and it's like, "Hey, because my in-laws, they kind of talk like this. It's like, hey, let me ask you something." I was like, "Yeah." It says, "You guys, what's this stuff out in the?" I said, "Well, it might be a coyote." A coyote. I said, "Whoa, slow down, slow down. You're inside, right? They're off in the woods. Don't leave your food out. Don't leave your trash out. You'll be okay. It might be a raccoon." "Oh my God, there's raccoons." I was like, "Where did you think you're living?" It's so funny. Just like if you put me in a townhouse in Chicago, I would be like, "Get me out of here." But the great thing is that, back to your book, I didn't mean to get too far from it, but the great thing is, this, like you said, is like a virtual step back in the best possible way. And it can give people that break. It doesn't matter if you're country or if you're a city person or living on the other side of the planet. That's the great thing about it. I probably should have said, I don't know if I said this at the start of the show, and I need to because I'm in these guys' debt for having me on. You may be listening to this on YouTube, and if so, please, if you are so inclined, like and subscribe to my page. I always appreciate it. Check out stevieasher.com, and you may be hearing this on SoundCloud, iHeart, iTunes, all those different ones, but the big one, Paranormal UK Radio, who's gracious enough to carry me worldwide. I'm in your debt. I should probably ask you, now I know you said yours is on Kindle, yours is on Amazon. You also said Books A Million, I believe. Where's different places they can get your books?
Barnes & Noble.
Sorry, my bad.
No, that's okay. Barnes & Noble and Books A Million and let's see, iTunes, I believe, and any bookstore that, any store that carries books can get it. Walmart.com can get it. But yeah, it's
cool.
It's available anywhere. It actually is. The libraries can also get it. It's actually in Frankfurt right now to the World Book Trade.
That's great.
I was really happy about that. For it to go over there and be displayed during the trade week. There's publishers and producers and several other different people that are going through there to get ideas of, okay, I like this book, I want to publish it over here in other languages, is what the fair is basically for.
That's good. Because I was going to ask you is, in regards of like your book signings and whatnot, I definitely think that this would fit really well. Like, say if you have something, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Land Between the Lakes. There's an area called Land Between the Lakes here in Western Kentucky, and they have
I've been there.
Okay, cool. It's a wonderful place. I think it goes all the way down into around Dover, Tennessee. But anything where they would have, say, a homestead that touches back on the older days, or anywhere that would kind of go back to that kind of what I would call the golden age, which every age had its problems. But 50s, early 60s, and if you're in the country, that's what I try to explain to people. It's like we didn't really have like the big hippie thing, hardcore. I was raised by Depression era parents. I was the youngest of 7. They had me when they were almost in their 50s. So I got the rearing of like World War II boomer
Hmm.
kids. So I have that same sort of I don't know I don't know what you would call it. The the thing of, I will hold a door if people take it wrong, I apologize. I'm just trying to be friendly. And if I tell you, and if I'm short a penny, I'll come back that afternoon, that next morning, and make sure I paid you that penny. That's not because I'm so morally wonderful, but it's just that was born into me. And I think anything that touched on nostalgia and touched on, mysteries, especially things geared toward children, I think you would just be outstanding in doing.
Yes. Uh, this book, that's exactly it. Uh, the kids say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir. No, they have manners, and I miss that. Or our generations are getting away from that.
Well, I mean, I think some of it too is, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I've seen kids here that are very mannerly, that will hold a door for an elderly person. If somebody
Oh
comes into
yes.
a doctor's office, and if and some people take it as being sexist or misogynistic or whatever. If I'm in a room, a lady comes in, I'll offer them the seat. I don't care if they're younger than me or if they're older than me. You offer them a seat. It's just one of these things. A funeral happens. We actually live right next door to a funeral parlor, which I know it sounds like a Stephen King movie, but it's true. And a lot of times, if I'm pulling out somewhere and here comes a procession, of course, I'll kind of turn my lights on, and I'll park my car to the side of the road. We actually stop for funerals here, and kind of bow, not bow my head like in a prayer, but just kind of like out of reverence, and let them pass. That's just what you do. It's just like back in the day. You say yes, ma'am. You say no, sir, and all that stuff, and it's just ingrained in the times of it. And there's still people that's like that. But I think once you had, remember, like the World War II guys says, we want the kids to have everything we never had, um, everything we ever had. They don't want to have to work as hard. And then, especially when you started going into the 60s and 70s, and I know I sound ultra conservative, but the thing of going, well, just you don't have to owe anybody anything. You just do what you want, and it's all about me. And you lost that element, that thing that made that social kind of contract as like it was out the window. It seemed like, but I don't know. I think it's still there, and I think there's a romanticism to it now. It's funny, everything's secular. I think now because it's been so out the window. Like if you watch, I laugh because I joke with my wife because she loves like Hallmark and all those things, and you see like very gentlemanly men and women, and very some would call it sappy, but just sweet people and sweet stories, and I think people need that. I think they need
Yes.
confirmation and or reconfirmation that humanity's not circling the bow. It's just sometimes there's hiccups, and we kind of got to come back to center sometimes on stuff. Um,
Yes. We get lost.
yeah, happens to the best of us. It's one of those things of again, everything's secular. Sometimes things are too very hardcore right wing, or sometimes it's extremely liberal and loose and back and forth. But more often than not, people find their way, especially if you've got somebody there who's trying to provide you, if you want to call it moral support, if you want to call it a maybe quasi-religious type of person, a grandparent or whatever, a father figure, a mother figure, whatever is there, because so many families don't have that, because the concept of the nuclear family is all but gone. I mean, I've heard people say they want to destroy the nuclear family, and to me that's pretty scary, because
Yeah.
without that bedrock of, and it just doesn't even have anything to do with being religious. It just has to do with, you can, even if a person isn't a particularly religious person, there's so many tenements of, let's say the Bible and stuff. We'll just say the Bible, that are very good and moral lessons. and I think it's necessary. Well, let me ask you this in the last few minutes that we got. First of all, is there anything that you want to say to your readers? Is there anything, maybe some questions that they've asked you that you want to address in the last few minutes that we've got?
Let's see. I've had readers ask me what I do when I get writer's block. Well, you're gonna laugh. So it is kind of funny. When I write, I have to have a kids movie playing to make me think like a kid. And
Like a primer for your brain to get into the mind frame
yes,
of it. Yeah.
Exactly. I have to be primed up, and I have a Charms Blow Pop watermelon that I eat while I'm writing.
That's funny.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Watermelon and grape. And once it's done, I shut my computer and walk away to give my brain a little break.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll come back and start another movie, and again have another blow pop and write some more. I have on occasion gotten to the point where I've been stuck on, okay, which way should I go? And neither one of those work for me. Then I have to walk away, go play with the dog, go outside and mow, do something else, and stay away from the story for a couple days or a couple weeks. And then I have to come back and say, read the last chapter over to get back into the groove.
Right, to wade back into it. Well, I think that's true of a lot of people. I mean, I've always heard, like, not so much that what you do is a superstition, but it's just sort of like, I know, like, sports people, like, they will wear a lucky pair of socks or a ball cap. For me, like, it depends. I have a tendency of wanting to, I get bored with stories. I know it sounds horrible, but I'll, like, do X amount on one book, and I'll have, like, 10 or 15 different seeds, as I call them, and go, okay, here's a concept, here's a loose affiliation of characters, here's sort of what I'm looking at as the baseline and the background and the setting, and this is sort of what I want the outcome to be as of now. And so I'll get bored with something, or I'll get to a point going, I just don't know. And then I'll leave it alone for, like you said, for a few days, a few weeks, and I know it's like if I'm doing a thing, if I'm writing it, say in the early days, it might have like Western music, or I may have, if I play it in the 70s or 80s, I'm going to have some old school, 70s, 80s music on it. So I think it's something really, it's something common. There's a common thread in people, and it's just really interesting that you do that. Well, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, my daughter, she got me a book, Character Development Journal, and I tell you what, that really works. It really works. If you're starting a new book or want a new character, go through, and it has all the characteristics of a person. You can check off their age, their height, their eye color, their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
That's cool, yeah. I mean, and that's one of those things, I think, one thing I would say to any young writer, or even an old writer like myself, there generally isn't dumb ideas, and I'm the worst of, like, if I used to would not, maybe sometimes stuff comes in dreams, or maybe it's just a mishmash of something I bumped into or saw or encountered, and I was like, oh, that would be kind of an interesting idea, and if I don't write it down, it didn't happen. And like you said, write everything down, and even if it doesn't connect with what you're writing now, that little seed may connect with something that you end up writing later down the path. But I'll tell you, Lauri, we're at the end of the thing. If you'll stick around long enough for me to do my outro, I'll talk to you in just 1 second, unless you got to go,
Okay.
and I understand.
Okay. Thank you very much
Absolutely, I'll
for
speak to you.
having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Totally, it was a pleasure and a blessing to have you here. So, there you go, folks. L.A. Williams. Make sure to check out that book. And like I said, it is available in Kindle and paperback, The Cave of Mystery. And the follow-up to that is going to be coming out pretty soon. Very interesting lady. So make sure you check this out. But I want you guys, depending on where you're at, if it's still sun out there, go out there and enjoy that. Go out there and play and frolic. But as the shadows grow long from the sun setting behind the pines, make sure to check under your bed, out your window, out that back hallway. You never know what might be there. It might be a witch out into trees, or there might just be a friend that wants to play. But either way, take care of each other, love one another, and until next time, take care, everybody. Good night.